Which is best, cooking steak in butter or putting the butter on after you cook the steak? Two completely different techniques to cook steak, but using the same ingredient.
Big thanks to Napoleon Grills for sponsoring this episode.
And of course, I want to find out which of these techniques tastes best. Everybody knows that French trained chefs love to put butter in their pan and just keep scooping it onto the steak. And you can argue that this is a good technique that makes your steak taste better, even though chefs really don't use that technique in restaurants because they don't have the luxury to stand around and scoop butter all over their steaks while there's another 100 customers waiting. That's right, in reality, they put just a little bit of butter after they cook the steak. I thought we might as well find out for ourselves which of these techniques is the best. And this beautiful piece of meat is on one hand the entrecôte or loin, and on the other side we have the ribeye. And this particular meat comes from a crossbreed of Holsteiner dairy cows mixed with Black Angus cows. And if you live in the Netherlands, you live in a dairy country, and that is as good as it gets. And with this piece I have the luxury to cut my own steaks, so I'm just gonna get 1-inch thick steak out of this piece. Look at that. A beautiful steak. And it's actually kind of cool because you can see the transition from a ribeye to the loin. This is still a ribeye with the cap on. On this side the cap gets thinner. And if you look at this, then you're all the way into the loin. Of course I'll be picking two steaks that are almost identical to each other, so we have a good comparison. I've got one more preparation that I need to do before I can run this test. You see, the steak that I'm going to be cooking and then putting butter on afterwards, it needs an extra step of preparation. And therefore I'm going to cut off a big piece of butter. Like that. You see, I need to season this butter to make it taste even better and stand up to the butter that is being cooked with butter in the pan. And so I will be adding some fresh ingredients like some chives and garlic. Let's chop the chives fine. I really want to go fine since it's a butter and it kind of needs to disappear. You don't want really big chunky bits on your steak after you cooked it. So this is about 100 grams of butter, a tablespoon of chives, and now on to the garlic. For the garlic, I recently tested a trick. See, all you gotta do is cut the ends of the garlic off and peel it, of course. Put it on the board and then just whack it. And then you see, you're almost done with getting chopped garlic. Real nice and real fine. It's basically already melting. And then in the end, I'm gonna press it again. Turns the garlic into puree. I'm gonna get a decent sized twig parsley. And I'm gonna take off the stalks. And now we have the holy triangle of flavor. Garlic, parsley, and a little bit of chives. Let's get this on. And the final ingredient is going to be the PITMASTERX Texas seasoning. I'm going to put a tablespoon of that in the butter. And that's the real kicker. Then I like to switch to gloves to really get in there and make sure that everything's well mixed up. Of course, you can use a machine to do basically the same thing, but there's something about this handiwork. It just makes the butter perfectly to temperature, perfectly mixed up. And all I need to do now is just wait for those steaks. You can see the 4 hours really drew the moisture out of the steak and the meat kind of became a darker color of red. So these are now ready for the experiment. I'll start by cooking a steak in a cast iron pan. Put some butter in it, and if I say some butter, if you know me, you know me. Of course, the same ingredients go in, except this time all I need to do is crush the garlic. I'm not gonna mince it completely as I really want it to stick together. The same goes for the parsley and chives. I'm just gonna put it in whole. And now this goes onto the side burner. Once the butter melts and the bubbles disappear, it's time to put the steak in the pan. Now, of course, you're gonna get that super satisfying sizzle that is freaking amazing. And also the fragrance that comes out of this pan is mind-blowing. Now, the first thing you want to achieve is that slow buildup of the sear on the outside. A crust that is beyond belief, and you can only get that in that beautiful cast iron. Of course, I left as much fat on the steak as possible to get that beef fat to melt in with the butter and add extra flavor. Once the steak hit that 50 mark, it's time to take it off and put it on the board to let it rest. For this steak, I will be using the reverse sear method, which means I'm going to put it on the barbecue over indirect heat, turn the burners on the other side, and then we're going to let the barbecue come up to temperature while closing the lid. And that is now at 52 degrees Celsius. Time to take this off. One thing I already noticed is that it takes a lot longer to cook over indirect heat than cooking in a pan. Both of the steaks are now resting, but I'm not done with the reverse sear method. So while I wait for this steak to rest, I think we might as well slice into our beautiful pan sear steak. I'm gonna go straight through the middle and flip it over. Now to me, that steak looks pretty tasty. But what I immediately noticed is that there is a lot of gray edge on the outside, and of course that comes from the cooking process. When you apply direct heat and so much of it, it cooks faster, but it also cooks the steak a little bit more uneven. Now, does that mean we're going to have a bad steak? Oh, absolutely not. Because this steak smells freaking amazing. You can definitely see we got a good crunchy crust. The steak is still juicy. Let's do the taste test. I do see why people like this method a lot. It is super, super tasty. Just the amount of flavors that you get from this beef is so insane. It's got the flavor from the crust, the sweetness of the beef, yet the fat melted down and rendered out. And of course the flavor of the ingredients that I put on top. No, really, really good. I once again preheated my side burner and this steak now goes on. I'm only going to need a quick sear on both sides of the steak just to build up a crust and to get a nice bit of Maillard effect, which again is going to give me that sweetness and flavor of the beef. Well, that's plenty of crust. Just put that on the board. While in the meantime, I'm going to take a cast iron pan and put some of that herb butter in. I'm going to let that melt. This steak now no longer needs resting because I grilled it for a short period of time, like 20 seconds. So that means I get to slice into this steak. And yes, I haven't applied the butter yet, I know. Let's just get a couple of slices out of this steak. You can see we have a lot more edge-to-edge pinkness. You have a better cook throughout, technically speaking, because it's edge-to-edge pink meat. We do have that brown crust, but it's a less pronounced crust. You can hear that the crust is good, but it's less thick and less crusty. And as for the second technique with the butter, it's just pouring this over when the steak is done. How about that? So I finished both techniques, but I still have to do the taste test on this one. That looks marvelous. There we go. That just tastes so good. Insane. So here's my conclusion. I think that the pan-seared steak has a better build-up crust, but a better crunch comes at a cost, because technically a big part of the steak is overcooked, whereas the reverse seared steak has a perfect edge-to-edge pinkness, but then of course a less pronounced crust. And how do the flavors compare? Well, the pan-seared steak has beautiful flavors. It also has that brown butter, and the reverse seared steak has more juiciness and actually a little bit more tender. And with the butter poured over afterwards, it is still a tasty steak with loads and loads of flavor. Both techniques work really well, and that's why they always go head to head. French chefs always choose for the pan. Pitmasters always choose reverse sear method. Let me know, which one do you prefer? While you write your comments, I'm gonna eat both of these steaks, don't worry. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.